back. You're with Deborah Kaufman, moderating Broadcast Beat, and we have a group of SMPTE luminaries with us.
Does that make us a light?
Yes, you're all you're illuminated in the light, and you're luminaries. Directly to my right, we have Howard Locke, who's the Director of Standards. This is a relatively new gig for you, right?
It's new for me, yes. It's the position's been around for a while, and
Yes.
it used to be held by Peter Symes, so I like to say I'm Peter Symes 2.0.
I love it. Very good. Next to him, Bruce Devlin, who's a SMPTE Standards Vice President.
Not yet.
Oh, not yet.
I will be.
Incoming.
Incoming.
Yeah.
When do you come into this position?
I come into this position on the 1st of January.
Excellent.
And so at that point the weight will be coming down on my shoulders.
I see.
Which is a segue into Alan.
All right. And Alan Lambshead also, so you are the
I
outgoing,
am the outgoing
SMPTE Standards
VP,
Vice President.
And on December 31st, the weight will be coming off of my shoulders.
So what is your advice then to Bruce on becoming Standards Vice President?
Stand up and keep your shoulders sturdy because the weight will come.
The weight will come. Well,
Like
sounds interesting. I'm sure we'll talk about some of those weights.
Alan
right?
has been smiling a lot more lately, I've noticed.
I've never seen him so happy, actually.
Well, but Bruce, you're a smiley kind of a guy.
I am. I feel that, when you're trying to, keep the MXF community together, that a good, happy disposition is my best weapon.
Excellent. I love this. And this, of course, is on top of your regular gig, correct?
Yes. I run a company called Mr. MXF where I do just that. I try to herd the MXF and IMF cats together and keep them all happy and smiley, going in the right direction.
So in other words, you've chosen a very difficult hobby.
Yes, I will use that expression to Mrs. Devlin when I explain what the job entails from January 1.
Although it's hardly a hobby. I mean, it's such a, SMPTE standards are, what run our entire industry. So yeah, there's that weight on your shoulders
It is a
again.
big job.
Yeah,
It is a big job, and thankfully we have volunteers such as Alan and Bruce to take on this position because it is a full-time job almost, pretty much.
It is.
Right. Okay. Well, there's a lot of really exciting stuff going on at SMPTE. And here we are at the SMPTE 2017 annual conference. How's the conference been for you guys so far?
It's been fantastic. I think this is one of our better years, especially in the past 10 years. Attendance is up and the exhibition space is up, and we have a lot of really good papers. I haven't seen the papers because I've been working around the show, but I think really good.
Yeah, there's been some really good solid papers.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard as well. I love attending, hearing the papers, even though some of them are a little too geeky for me.
Yeah.
But I always get amazing things from it, and I've heard there's been some really excellent presentations. And it's a good crowd.
It's a great crowd, and I haven't heard hardly any complaints at all, but a lot of compliments about how well the show's been.
Excellent.
It's a good buzz as well. I mean, some years, it's papers and lunch. But this year, there's lots of really buzzy conversations and people huddling together in corners. You get the feel that there's something's going on. We're moving forwards. It's good.
That's very, very exciting to hear.
They're trying to find air-conditioned places to have those.
Well, there is that. It's probably the hottest show we've ever had.
Absolutely.
As well, too,
In many ways.
October.
Well, the temperature, we'll only briefly discuss this, broke the records we've been keeping since 1870.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, anyway.
And I thought it was just us weak Europeans who were being fried out there, but you were being fried as well, so that's okay.
We're being fried.
It's even hot for us locals, I'll tell
Oh,
you.
there you go.
Well, let's start talking with two, hot topics at SMPTE, which is 2110 and IMF. So, who wants to start? 2110?
Let's over this way, 2110. Maybe we should
so-
explain a little bit what
Yes.
it is.
So 2110, ST 2110 is a family of documents that are specifying the carriage of video and audio essence over IP networks. Our traditional infrastructure in the broadcast television has been coaxial cable for the last 50 years through analog TV and into standard def digital, high def, and even in ultra high def was all done on coaxial. So 2110 is the new standard that sets the platform for the future for the migration over to IP networks. And there are 4 documents that are the first 4 that are all approved now. The last one of the 4 just has to go through its process audit with the Standards Committee, and then that will be the sort of the initial documents for uncompressed video, uncompressed audio, and and the timing and parameters that are related to that. And that's the initial group.
Well, and I have to say, from sitting in this position, I think the transition to IP networks is just a huge topic.
Yeah, and it's phenomenally, and there's a big transformation going on in the broadcast world to move over to full IP facilities. We have here at the show the IP showcase that is actually demonstrating the 2110 actually working, along with its underlying specification, which is ST2059, which has to do with timing. And that's kind of the new black burst and stuff that goes over the Ethernet. So the good thing I think about this project was we not only were just doing standards like we normally do on paper, but we were doing interop and plugfest at the exact same time.
Right.
So by the time the standard is ready to come out in publication, we already have over 50 vendors right now supporting and interchanging content with this standard. So it's been a really good process this time.
Yeah, and
That's
that interop has enabled us to get a standard that is, because it's fairly new technology, there's always the risk that it won't work out of the gate. And so that's why it was important to do the interop while we were doing the standards, because they informed the documents as they were being created.
So that seems really interesting to me, that you were working with vendors so that they could, issue, come out with products even prior to the standard being totally finalized.
Yeah, it's worked out really well because, like Alan says, it feeds back in the standards process. So if somebody didn't read it correctly off the standard, you would know that because they would try to implement it a little bit differently. And we'd know we have to go back and fine tune that just a little bit to make sure that it's clear to everybody. And so it does a lot of help. It's probably going to be the way that a lot more of our new standards are going to be done.
Was this a first actually for SMPTE to do it this way?
We've done some interop and plugfest before. IMF is another one that's actually doing that as well too.
Okay.
But it seems to really help the process a lot.
Okay, great.
I was just going to say that when you write a standard, you're starting, especially something like 2110 that's really breaking new ground, that people haven't really done it before. As the standards writer and the standards group, you feel that you know everything and you feel that you've covered all the bases, but you don't have those moments when something that was so obvious once you've done a particular interop test and you realize there's a big hole in the document and it's only 3 or 4 words you need to put in there, but if those words aren't there, the system's not going to work. And that's really the power that interop gives. It allows you not only to know that your standard that you've written is going to work, but you've found the holes and you make certain that when people deploy it operationally, there's a very good chance that people can run businesses on this stuff, because at the end of the day, people are going to be betting the bank on the IP networks running their business, and it's got to work.
And in a way, what you're doing also is crowdsourcing with dozens of engineers and technologists and researchers who are adding to the mix.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We've had a group of probably about 150 people involved in the development of the 2110 family, from, as we say, probably 50 or more vendors and users. So it's not only manufacturers, but the user community said this is what we need.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we had people from the EBU, for example, who represent European broadcasters were very much there. And we had a lot of other users locally from the States here saying it has to do this, 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 and this, or we're not going to be able to use it.
Well, it's interesting because I always like to joke with people who are product managers that, the company invents a product and then the customers reinvent the product, right? They always end up being used in different ways and for different things than the manufacturer intended. So have any of those kinds of surprises come up with 2110?
We've tried to anticipate as much as possible. So 2110 is a format agnostic standard, so we've designed it in a way so that we can accommodate new video formats and audio formats as they come along without rewriting the standard.
Right.
And so it's sort of like the platform that a lot of workflows will build upon down the road.
But it's relatively new, so the users have not had that much opportunity to be working with it full-time in production. So we're just starting to see a little bit of feedback from the start, but that'll really increase, I think, in the next year.
Yeah, I think where the users will reinvent is in the workflows that will be enabled by the IP infrastructure.
Right, because there will be multiple workflows.
They're different workflows than a point-to-point coaxial one, for
It just
sure.
gives you that extra flexibility, and you give people flexibility, the first thing they do is they use it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the first thing they do when you use flexibility is you go, oh, well that didn't quite work as expected, but now I can do this. And so that sort of positive feedback and enthusiasm really helps.
And my understanding is there's already some implementations of IP networks, correct?
Yeah, there is. There's a couple places in Europe, and we're seeing it in the mobile trucks as well too.
Yes.
Come up. And greenfields, if you have a brand new facility, people are looking at this going, okay, it's just about ready. I'm going to build a wired network facility and not something that has SDI cables now running all the way through it. So yeah.
So with the publication of 2110, is that going to open the floodgates?
I think so. I think the floodgates are already starting to open even without the publication being out there at this moment. So we're hearing a lot of buzz about this, yeah.
Oh, that's great. So this will be the year that I write about 2110.
Oh yeah, you'll probably get tired about writing about 2110.
Oh, never tired.
Yeah.
It's also worth mentioning a little bit that as part of the Plugfest, the Plugfest kind of self-teaches the people involved in the Plugfest about the 2110. So actually it's not just the paper specification, it's that experiential knowledge that people are learning as part of doing the Plugfest. And that of course feeds into SMPTE's educational arm, where we're putting together training courses on 2110 and training courses on IMF based on things that we learned in the Plugfest. So we're able to teach people not just the what's in the document, on page 45, if the value is 1, then do this. I mean, that's pretty dull and tedious. But we also teach some of the experiential knowledge that we've discovered in doing the Plugfest and putting stuff together. So the first access people can really get to real experience is, well, go to a SMPTE training course, go to an environment like this where the people who've done it will stand up and help educate other people to say, we tried this, it didn't work, we tried that, it was brilliant. And you just get that knowledge through this Plugfest.
So it's a win-win model in every direction.
Yeah, and the other thing I think that's important to say is that because the IP infrastructure is so new to this industry, we have to do a lot of training with our engineers and system design people who know how to put a coaxial distribution system together, but they don't know how to put an IP network together. And there's a whole new set of knowledge that goes along with best practices. So we are working on a document in the 2059 family, the Time is Sync, which describes on what are the best practices for putting networks together in the broadcast plant, large and small, because they're different.
So is SMPTE going to also hold events that are going to help educate people?
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to partner up with workshops, have webinars, and also have some online courses as well too for 2110. So yeah, it's a whole thing. Joel's going to be quite busy from the SMPTE staff and the educational programs.
Yeah, he doesn't look nearly as happy as Alan does.
As Alan is, yeah.
He's got a work cut out for him,
He's
right?
got work cut out, yeah.
Well,
But
then
he's got a lot of help.
I mean, that once again kind of underlines what the importance of SMPTE is, right?
Exactly.
So it's the place you go for the real news and the real training.
It's the geek community.
It's the geek community,
Absolutely.
and we love them. So, Bruce, talk a little bit about where we're at with IMF, another very hot topic, correct?
Okay, so for 2110 is all about live. It's all about getting photons out of a camera into an IP network and getting it on screen. Whereas
Real time, yeah.
Real time. Whereas IMF is kind of the 2110 equivalent for scripted content, for movies, for episodics, where you're trying to streamline the international distribution or even the domestic distribution of titles. And the easy way to think about the problem that IMF solves is to say, well, just imagine the number of people that are going to view a particular title if it's on Netflix and Amazon and your local catch-up TV. So the number of actual views is less, so the amount of money you can spend preparing each version is going down. So somehow you've got to automate that whole back office stuff and try and, how are you going to make it efficient? And so SMPTE's IMF standard really is, it's like the data model that allows you to automate the generation of localized content. And we've thought through the system pretty much from the finished original master through to a territorial submaster, then through a specific version that might be the early evening French version, where the kids might be watching with certain content elements taken out, to the late night French version where you might put some of those elements back in again because people want to see that kind of stuff just to get those benefits. So that's what IMF does. And we've had a session here and a number of individual papers about people who are rolling IMF out. So there's been announcements from Netflix that IMF's their backbone, Amazon's using IMF as their I/O format to their hub, and most of the major studios, they're all doing IMF as well. And it's because you get better storage efficiency, you get better automation, just everything you need to do to drive your costs down and be more efficient. IMF is kind of like, it's the wonder sauce that does that. But at the end of the day, it's just a standard.
Yeah.
And yet it seems to be addressing, very directly one of the biggest challenges of versioning, out of control versioning.
Exactly,
Yep.
exactly.
So,
And the thing that really drove that with the early days is from the studios is that, one movie, for example, could have 33,000 different variations.
Yep.
So
33,000.
and now, and that was before HDR came in
Yeah.
4K. So you can imagine the number of distribution formats you need to distribute these days, it's just gone exponentially.
It's nuts.
So IMF creates that workflow that allows you to keep your sanity, basically.
Keep your sanity.
Right.
Dealing with all those different versions.
Well, manage your sanity.
Yeah, manage your sanity. That's right. That's right. You
Keeping
may
is a
not
long
keep
shot.
it.
It's
Yeah.
just a standard after all.
Yeah.
yes, and yet it's obviously one that's, been successful because people are already adopting it. How long did it take to develop the SMPTE IMF standards?
Well, it's quite a long journey because we were doing the precursor to IMF. You're in the cinema community and I was in the TV back
Right,
in 2006,
right.
2007,
Right.
working on the things that became IMF.
Right.
But really the journey to make IMF and make the standard is one part of the story. The thing that IMF will never do is get rid of fractional frame rates in the US and put fractional frame rates in Europe. IMF won't do that.
Yeah.
So we're still going to have these territorial differences that we have to do something about. And so we're seeing organizations like the Digital Production Partnership in the UK and NEIGHBOR in the US and other organizations in Japan try to say, okay, how do we use this standard in a more efficient way? And so the DPP and SMPTE made a little announcement recently.
Well,
How-
let's
would you like to
hear
talk a
about
bit
it.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've noticed that in the standards community and in the industry at large, we've got a great big growth of specifications. And the specifications are not standards. They're basically a bunch of people that are interested in the same thing or have a pain point, get together and say, let's write down on paper the way we want to do something. That becomes a specification.
Yeah.
Those can turn into standards at some point in time, but maybe they don't have to. We, on the other hand, on a standards process, go through a very rigorous due process to get consensus from everybody to agree to have something that's going to last a long time, 10 years or more in a standard. So what SMPTE's realized is like, look, the specifications kind of can become standards. We see a lot of that happen actually in 2110,
Yeah.
where AMWA created TRO3 and TRO4.
Right.
That was the specification, came into standards, and we turned it into 2110. We've decided, wow, with IMF, we've got standards that go along with it. But we need something that gets done maybe a little bit faster and a little bit more constrained to a certain specific kind of niche problem that they have. So the DPP and the...
Let me give you an example,
Yeah.
just to make it easy for the people watching, is like the metadata to describe a title in the UK is different to the metadata that you'd use to describe the title in the US because the business processes of broadcasting are different. You need different metadata to describe your business processes. And that'll never be a standard because it's going to change next year.
Yeah, yeah.
So we need a specification, a lighter process that's easier to change to hold the definition of those metadata values, for example.
So what SMPTE has done, we've expanded now to say, look, we need to get involved with this. How should we do this? We came to the DPP because they were just getting ready to start a project, and we said, look, why don't we partner up together with this and do a pilot project? That way, you can get your stuff done, and SMPTE will learn along the way as we go through this pilot project to find out how we form specifications, what kind of facilities we need around that, what kind of infrastructure, what kind of framework to do this. So this has been going on very, very well.
Very
in
well.
fact, I haven't heard a thing from the DPP in the specification group, which is wonderful for me, which means it's going swimmingly well, because otherwise I get the complaints on it.
No, well,
And,
you'll be getting all the actions, you see.
yeah,
We've
yeah.
been building up the action list for you. But
it'll slowly come down the list.
Yeah.
But the aim is to do it as 1 year. It started off in the summer of this year.
Yep.
And the aim is to have a finished specification by NAB of next year. So they work at a very, very fast pace.
Yeah.
Bruce can tell you that about that pace
but
because he's involved.
before we get to that, let me just ask a question with regard to this project with DPP. Is SMPTE taking kind of a silent role in watching their progress?
We're
or-
kind of facilitating, if you will. We have a
Okay.
lot of people that cross-pollinate, so we have a lot of SMPTE people that are involved
Okay.
in the DPP effort. But mostly what we are is a facilitator, and then at the end, we'll take that document and post it up on the SMPTE website for publication, basically. And what's different on this is that will be a free public-facing specification. So specifications, as far as we look at it, we like to get them out to the world, not have them behind a paywall, and it really then gets adopted very, very widely. So that's part of the process of this pilot project.
And the advantage of having a SMPTE put the document out there is there's an expectation that SMPTE is going to remember it forever because we are like, we are the the industry memory of all the technology
Yes.
forever. You know, you look in the journal and there's stuff from 100 years ago about how to put the sprocket holes in.
Right.
Well, 100 years ago, somebody's going to be reading, oh, why did they need that metadata back in 2017 or 2018? They won't know why, but they can go and read the document, and that's what SMPTE does. We remember what's important forever.
Yeah, you're the repository really for the technical history of our industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I know this. You were talking about how fast this is going to be. That it's going to be within a 1-year process.
Yeah.
And I know that we talked earlier about how there's somehow this perception that that the wheels at SMPTE grind very slowly.
Yes. Well, I think the misunderstanding has always been that SMPTE standards take forever, which is not the case. If you look at 2110, I think it was done in about a year and a half. I think.
18 months
18
from
months.
when they started to now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
they've been
we-
meeting every week,
Yeah.
large groups between 50 and 100 people every week.
But it is a due process rigid procedure. So because we need to go by ANSI rules and standardization rules and we're accredited, we have to do a due process step along the way. So it's going to take that time. Whereas we're doing more and more software standards now, and software uses agile development, they'll run on these kind of sprints, if you will. We're now in the specification world, especially with a pilot project, adopting kind of that same principle. Let's run on sprints. Let's fail early, fail often, sprint to this thing,
Right.
get it done, adapt until we're at the place where it's good enough that we can run, and it goes out there. And then you can come back and do a version 2.0 and all that kind of stuff. But keep that time frame short, do these sprints, get that stuff out there.
Well, I'm curious.
Just an example, there's a couple of the less controversial IMF documents start to finish 6 months.
Yeah.
So why did you talk to people who had that perception that it was, that this was moving very slowly? Why do people have that perception?
We talk to a lot of people about that and always try to put that myth behind us, but it's just I think more and more people are a little bit more impatient these days because technology is moving so fast.
Yeah. I want to get that product out.
I want to get that product out tomorrow, right? And
Right,
if I'm going to do a
right.
standard, it's going to take me probably a year. So, and I don't have a year. I want to be like 3 months, not a year. So, that kind of adds into it. But, if you look at us compared to other standards body, we're just as fast or even sometimes faster.
We are faster than a
Oh,
lot of them, actually.
do give some examles. I'd love to know.
Well,
that.
I don't want to name names because they'll come back after me and kind of.
There are other 3-letter acronyms.
Other
standards
3-letter
organ-
acronyms.
Organizations, yes.
Take a long time.
Yeah.
Well,
It's a fundamentally difficult thing. If you've got a room of 100 people who have to agree on one thing and write it down, getting agreement amongst 100 people who are all generally smart people who have their own opinions about the best way to do things, that can take time. And our process, the SMPTE process, is designed to get that agreement as fast as we can.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you've got 2 people fighting who refuse to give in, you can't get it through until we find some way around those.
But we have and are constantly working at our process to streamline it, to make sure that it's efficient, to eliminate roadblocks like that, and we do have mechanisms that we've added recently that give a way out of an impasse.
Yeah.
Whereas previously those were,
They were blockers, they're not anymore.
yeah, they were blockers, and now we have a way past the blockers. But it still takes time.
It takes time, yeah.
great. So what does the upcoming year hold for SMPTE then?
Oh, many things. So we're wading into a VR study group coming up to look at VR in a very, very niche, I should say, looking at production and post-production side of things, on the professional side of things like that. We've got many different other efforts, too many to name that I can think of. We'll continue on with the 2110 suite and continue to put documents in that. We're also looking at time labels. Time code has been around for many, many years.
Yes.
And
Since
what-
1975.
Since 1975, Alan was really involved in that side of things.
Yeah.
So now where do we go with the next generation time code to support high frame rate, file-based workflows, and also fit in with the 2059 synchronization from IEEE. So
Excellent.
In fact, you just have to look through the list of papers in this year's program that covered things like microservices, that covered VR, that covered IMF, that covered cloud-based working. So whilst we can't reveal all the projects because SMPTE has a process that says we can't tell you about them in the public forum until they're kind of more mature, but the conference program will give a very good hint as to the sorts
As
of
to
things
where
that
we're
you're going to
going.
see next year.
Very good. Well, I look forward to the next time we all speak. I'm sure we'll have many new things to talk about then.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for appearing today, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
thank you.